Stakeholder analysis is about finding out who the stakeholders are, what their interests are, and how we can best involve them during the planning and implementation phases. So, stakeholders are persons or groups of persons who have a stake, or positive or negative, directly or indirectly in a given project. Stakeholder analysis is then the technique to identify who they are, what their interests are, and assess the importance of these stakeholders who may significantly influence the success of your project. Then stakeholder involvement or management is about managing their involvement and also the communication with stakeholders. The term project, program, and development intervention will be used interchangeably throughout the RBM course. So, why do we bother to make a stakeholder analysis? Well, imagine playing soccer and not knowing who's on your team and who's on the opposite team. It would probably be difficult to know who to pass the ball to, and the game would also be full of more or less pleasant surprises. When we undertake stakeholder analysis, we find out who the different players are, what they are good at, what they like, and what their interests and relative strengths are. The stakeholder analysis also gives us an idea of who we shall inform and involve in the different phases of a project. Excluding powerful stakeholders can create resistance. On the other hand, including key stakeholders in both project planning and implementation can create support, motivation, ownership, and make sure that valuable knowledge and ideas are included in the project planning. So, how do you do it? Well, it's relatively easy to make a stakeholder analysis. First, you make a list of the different stakeholders that will have an interest in the development activity. Then, out of these stakeholders, you can select the most important ones and try to find out what their real interests and potential influence are in relation to the project. Remember that interests can both be the officially formulated interests as well as the more hidden ones. Finally, based on the mapping of stakeholders and their interests and influence, you can start thinking about how you can best involve the different stakeholders. Involvement can range from just informing to consulting, and yet other stakeholders are in fact involved in taking decisions. On the following slides, we present 3 small tools for stakeholder mapping, stakeholder analysis, and stakeholder involvement. The tools are just examples and should be adjusted to the specific needs of your project or program. The Venn diagram is a useful tool for mapping of stakeholders. The potential project is put in the middle, and the different categories of stakeholders are now mapped out in the form of a Venn diagram. Important stakeholders can be illustrated as bigger players, bigger circles, than the less important ones. And the distance to the project can also be used to illustrate how close a given stakeholder is to the project focus. Remember to involve key stakeholders in the stakeholder analysis. They probably see things differently than you do and might know of stakeholders that you haven't noticed. Let us try to make a quick stakeholder mapping for this RBM e-learning course. Key stakeholders are the course participants and their organizations. They need a fellowship center who has financed the development of the course. The course developer, that's me. Other providers of e-learning courses within RBM, that could be potential competitors. and perhaps even other important stakeholders that can influence the success or failure of your action plans. Another tool for making a stakeholder analysis is a stakeholder matrix, where you can state the interests, the influence, the suggested involvement, and the relative importance of each of the key stakeholders. This tool can help you when you want to plan how to involve the different stakeholders in your development intervention. This matrix focuses on the different levels of involvement of a given stakeholder in the different project phases. The presented diagrams and matrices shall only be used if it adds value to the stakeholder analysis process. You might also design your own matrix focusing on the areas that you find most interesting to highlight in relation to a stakeholder analysis. Now it's time for an exercise. So in order to ensure learning and not just listening to me, we will now ask you to make your own stakeholder analysis. You can choose a project or a program that you have recently been involved in, or it could be a program that you are about to formulate. Now, make a stakeholder analysis, including the following 3 steps. Make a list of the most important stakeholders. Secondly, for each stakeholder, summarize their main interests with regard to the project, both the formal, more official interests and the more hidden interests that are rarely put in writing. Finally, assess or suggest, if you are formulating a new program, the level of involvement of 1 or 2 of the key stakeholders. Are they or have they been sufficiently involved, and is stakeholder communication sufficient? Now, on the basis of these 3 steps, write down the main points of your analysis in a text document or on paper to be used later on in connection with subsequent analysis and assignments. You can pause the PowerPoint video while you are doing the exercise. Welcome back from your assignment. I hope you have gained valuable insight into the stakeholders of your program or organization using the stakeholder analysis. Before we go on to the next tool, which is the problem analysis, there are a few key points that we want to remember about stakeholder analysis. First of all, remember that stakeholder analysis and management is a powerful strategic project management tool that can help you identify stakeholders and their interests and guide you in the process of involving key stakeholders in the various project phases. We hope you have by now realized the usefulness of the tool and will finish off this submodule by stating 3 key points about stakeholder analysis. First of all, involvement of stakeholders from the early stages of a project most often promotes ownership and commitment, which is key to the success of a development intervention. Secondly, by involving stakeholders in project planning, for instance in the problem analysis and in formulating the theory of change, you get a better idea of their real interests and also potentially a more realistic and robust project. Finally, communication with and not only to key stakeholders throughout the project is crucial. If you feel like it, you can use another 3 minutes to watch another introduction to stakeholder analysis that we have found on YouTube. It constitutes the last element of this submodule on stakeholder analysis.